Alrighty. Hi everyone, good morning. I think it's still morning and it's dry for now, so don't want to jinx us, but thanks for being here. My name's Jessica Finn-Coven and I'm the director of the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Environment. It is really great to welcome you all here today to talk about what's really the next chapter in Seattle's work to reduce carbon pollution and grow our clean energy future. And it couldn't be a better time for us all to be here having this discussion on the last day of the Global Climate Action Summit, where cities from around the world have gathered and come together to say we are still in, and we will not abdicate our responsibility to tackle this important issue of climate change. And for me, it is truly an honor that we're joined here today by Mike Bloomberg. Mike is the United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Action and former mayor of New York City. While mayor, Mike pioneered ambitious new strategies that became national models on public health, government innovation, and climate change. As chair of the C40 Climate Leadership Group from 2010 to 2013, Mike drew international attention to cities' leading role in the fight against climate change. He serves as the UN Secretary General, Special Envoy for Climate Action, with the charge to galvanize the efforts of local and regional governments, businesses, and civil society. And for all of us working on climate change, Mike really is an inspiration. So please join me in welcoming him here today.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for welcoming me to your city. I haven't been here in about 3 or 4 years. You can hear me? Do you have it now? They can hear. You can't hear. That's okay. It's only important that they hear. Huh? Like that? Yes. It wants to go down. Should I start out from the beginning and saying thank you? No, I don't have to do that. Seriously, thank you for having me. The mayor and I just came from Macrina, a chain of 5, I think it was, stores where they have great coffee and great pastries. I don't think it was good for my waistline, but I will say that I enjoyed it a lot, and people that we met so far could not be nicer. I did want to thank Jessica and the mayor. Jenny, thank you for having us. I did get to know your mayor when she came to New York for a program that we have with the Harvard Business School and Kennedy School of Government in helping mayors network with each other and learn what works elsewhere so that they can use it in their cities. And she said that the Seattle Storm was going to win the WNBA championship, and she did. Next year, New York Liberty. That's okay. New York has not had a basketball championship since I was in my 30s. And if you do some research, you'll find that was a long time ago. Anyways, it's great to be here with the mayor and to talk about the urgent challenges that we all face. All cities really are the same, whether they're small or large, and big cities like Seattle and New York certainly are no exceptions. People need services, and there's never enough money to provide the services to everybody that needs them. But good mayors find ways to pull people together and get volunteers and do public-private partnerships and convince the public that they're spending their monies efficiently and on the right things. And when you do that, I've always found that the taxpayers are willing to pony up. We all want to help each other, and it's great when you have a city like Seattle where a new mayor comes in and she's got lots of ideas, and I think everybody's lucky to have her. We can't afford to avoid the risks that we all face. Things like climate change and guns are things that all cities have and they're worried about. Anybody that thinks the climate isn't changing just hasn't read the newspapers. Just look at the storm that's coming into South Carolina, which will be devastating to them. But things like that are happening all over the country, in fact, all over the world. And then this crisis we have with guns is something we just have to stop. It's a scourge on our society. And it gets down to the mayors that are the ones that can really do things. at the federal level and the state level. They talk a lot, but it's the mayors that have to go to the funerals. It's the mayors that have to go and console people when their property is destroyed. It's the mayors that have to answer when the kids don't get a good education. And that's why I think being a mayor is a much better job than any other job. I've known a number of mayors who went on to be governors, and they all wish they'd gone back to be mayors. So you're not going to run for governor, are you?
No way.
I wouldn't say. When it comes to the climate, think of the climate as really an environmental issue. It's devastating potentially down the road, but even today, you don't want you or your family to be breathing bad air and drinking polluted water and having to deal with congestion that keeps you from getting into a good job or getting to school. So the issues of climate change are the environmental issues and the things we have to deal with today. Then there's also things like saving money. Nobody wants to spend more than they have to. Energy efficiency is something that will save people's money, but also will let us reduce the amount of pollution that is created. So fighting climate change is one of the things that gets down. The mayor's doing it. And I will say that I think Seattle and a number of other cities in America give us real hope. There are a lot of good cities around this country, and they are cities that have people feel proud to live there, and for all of the craziness that we see coming out of Washington, people are happy with what they hear at home and are proud to be Americans and proud to be part of their city. And I just wanted to say thank you to the mayor. There are 2 cities that I wanted to announce are winning a prize from Bloomberg on some of the work that we've done, which we can talk about later on. And happy to say that the 2 that I can announce today are Seattle and Atlanta. Anyways, Mayor, thank you for having us. You're doing a great job so far. Keep it up. It is not easy. You will have plenty of days when you wake up and you say, what? Number one, you'd say, well, I didn't say that, and of course you did. And you learn with that. But number 2, I've always thought that people recognize somebody that's genuine and is really making a difference and is trying. And you're not going to be right every time, but people will cut you a big break if they think you care and that you understand them. So congratulations. All the best.
Thanks.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor Bloomberg. We are really honored to have you here in Seattle. And I can tell you, in the short time that I've been mayor, I've seen the difference that Mayor Bloomberg and his organizations have made for cities across the country, and particularly here in Seattle. Not only was I able to participate in the mayor's conference that he described, where I was able to meet with mayors not just from across America, but across the world and exchange ideas. We've also turned to them on issues related to gun safety and, of course, on climate. I was down at the C40 conference in San Francisco on climate, and I can tell you that I left much more hopeful. I left much more hopeful because mayors are coming together, not just across this country, but across the world. And in the absence of leadership from our own federal government, we have doubled down in our commitment to the Paris Accords and to making sure that we do everything we can to improve the climate. It was really nice of you to come all this way to celebrate the Seattle Storm's victory. But honestly, we thank you for the support that we get from all the Bloomberg organizations. Because of your leadership, Seattle is now going to be closer to achieving its climate goals. We have always been that city that has invented the future, and I think we will continue to do that by partnering with Bloomberg and others across this country and across the globe to make sure we're doing what we have to. It wasn't too long ago that I stood in the same place to announce our climate action plan. And this grant from the Bloomberg organization allows us to accelerate what we're doing. I said together before that we have to boldly address this, not just for us and what's happening in our city, but for our children and for their children. It is the future generations that absolutely depend on us taking actions, bold actions, and urgent actions. I have to tell you that across the globe, the mayors that I talk to realize that if we don't have this kind of leadership at the city level, it won't happen. And we saw it here in Seattle. You know, I grew up here, and it used to be that there was 100 ways to describe rain. Rain, partly sunny showers. But this summer, for weeks, the forecast was smoke. And that is a direct result of the changing climate, where we have seen more forest fires in Canada and eastern Washington that have changed the air quality. For a period of time, the air quality was worse in Seattle than it was in Beijing. Think of that, the Emerald City. So there is more that we know we need to do. As Mayor Bloomberg said, we saw what's happened in South Carolina. When I was in San Francisco yesterday, I was talking to the mayor of Houston. And it used to be you would have every 50 years a significant storm in Houston with flooding. And now it's happening more and more regularly. And we also know that climate change impacts those who can least afford it and are most disadvantaged, not just in America, but across the globe. If you look at the droughts and the famines and the number of people having to flee countries because of that, that is a direct result of a changing climate. If you look in our own city, where the people are most poor live, they are dealing with the environmental burdens. And so we have to take that into consideration as we form our own climate plans. We said we are going to do what we can to protect our environment, our economy, and the future of our kids. And that means buses, cars, and trucks that make up about 2/3 of our climate burden, we have to shift. We need to get people out of their cars, out of single occupancy vehicles, and into other modes of transportation. Transit, biking, walking. This grant is going to allow us to do things we couldn't do before to make sure that we can accelerate our ability to meet our climate goals. If people do have to drive or the city needs vehicles, we want to move more and more of them as quickly as we can to be electric vehicles. We have to attack our climate goals on every front. Number one rule, get people out of their cars and out of vehicles when possible. Number two, if we have vehicles, make them as electric as possible. We know that working with Bloomberg, we will also be able to meet the second biggest cause for us on our climate burden, which is building efficiency. We have very bold vision in terms of what we can do by 2030, and this grant will help us analyze the data behind that. So thank you very much for your generosity. With this grant, we're going to be able to attack both vehicles and efficiency in buildings, and it will help us analyze what we think we need to do going into the future, which is congestion pricing. We know we have to do a lot of outreach, and we have to gain the data on that. We know that we cannot roll it out without addressing the very strong equity concerns. This will allow us to do that work to see how we can do it. But if you look across the globe, those cities that have implemented congestion pricing have had the greatest success on getting people out of vehicles and reducing vehicles in city. And it's had another huge, very important benefit, and that's a health benefit. The number of asthma cases in children have dropped precipitously in those areas where they've actually had congestion pricing. So we know we can't do it overnight, but we also know we can't do it without strong partnerships, including from the Bloomberg Philanthropies. So thank you, Mayor, for everything you've done for us. Yeah. And with that, I think we can take a couple of questions if there's any. No questions.
For Mr. Bloomberg, I'm sure you've heard this before. Are you running for president?
What I'm doing right now, all kidding aside, is I've taken a look at this country. I think we're in trouble. And one of the reasons we're in trouble is we elected somebody that I did not think was the right person for the job, and said so back then, if you remember. But we've had 2 years now of a Republican Congress that has not provided the checks and balances on the executive branch that the founding fathers meant to do. And so I'm focusing on trying to change the House from Republican to Democrat so that we will have somebody who will make a more balanced kind of government. And that's what I'm focusing on now, and after that we'll see.
Do you think a moderate on either side can win in this environment?
I think the American public is a lot smarter than people give them credit for. I think the election 2 years ago was an aberration. An awful lot of candidates, the press focusing on sensationalism rather than trying to give every candidate the ability to explain what they would do, and asking them to explain how and who would pay for it and that sort of thing. It got down to who could say the more outlandish things, and it was so polarizing that it wasn't a good expression, I think, of the American public's interest. People want balanced government. They want government that understands their problems. They don't expect it to do everything, but they care about the actions, and they also care about the temperament and how civil we are to each other. And I think it's time for a change, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
Mayor Durkan, can the city truly...
No, I'm not running for president.
She'd be a good one, though.
Can the city truly meet its climate change goals without building out the bicycle network as promised in Move Seattle, without building out the city center connector and completing the streetcar line?
We can meet those goals, and we've got to go on every component. And I think the mistake is to pull out any one component and focus on that. We have to have a holistic system. So we're going to have better mobility. We're going to have more improved bike lanes. We're going to make it easier for people to walk. And one reason we want congestion pricing is if you look at our city down the road for the next generation, if we want a city where people actually are out of their cars and they can walk and they can bike and they can have the outdoor cafes, it means fewer cars. And we're going to have a really, really difficult time. I want to take this moment again to remind people we are coming upon a period of maximum constraint. It really means it is going to be almost impossible to get from one end of Seattle to the next because of the number of buses we're going to have on the street when the tunnel closes. That's going to force us to change our behavior, and I think changing that behavior is actually going to be the one blessing from this period, because if we can get people out of their cars, onto the buses, onto the streetcars we have, looking to the future, into the bike lanes, we know that when we finish that period of maximum constraint, we'll have changed behavior.
Will you implement congestion pricing during this period of maximum constraint?
We've got to study first and see how we can implement it. So I think it's premature to say when it's going to go in, and this is one reason why this grant is so important. We've got a lot of work to do to see exactly how we would implement it, how we would put up the cameras to catch people, how you would charge, how much you charge, what we do from equity, because there's a number of people right now who have to travel into Seattle long term to have jobs because they can't afford to live here anymore. It's tied to affordability. So as mayor, I am absolutely committed to making Seattle a more affordable place, and to do that in conjunction with our transportation goals and our climate goals. In the long term, density helps our climate. If you have people living where they are near what they want, their restaurants, their movies, their schools, then you will reduce the burden on climate. So at the same time, we also have to make sure that we densify our neighborhoods, we densify our city, we provide good transit, and then we'll be further along in our goals.
In your mind, is the center city a done deal? Are we not going to see that ever? Or?
No, it is not a done deal. I think no one should mistake the fact that you ask hard questions doesn't mean you know what the answer is. It just means the public deserves to know the true costs of every project. And so we want to make sure that the public understands what the true costs are, what our alternatives are, and how much this would cost to build and to run. And so we have one last piece of work to do there in the engineering to see whether the new streetcars, if there's any additional costs that would require there to be retrofit. But along that, right now, we're listening to the public, we're listening to stakeholders, downtown Seattle and groups to say, how do we get people through Seattle? The number one thing we know, we need better mobility through downtown Seattle, absolutely, and as mayor, I'm committed to doing that.
Mayor Durkan, what about, are you going to increase your working with other communities? Because I commute every day from outside of Seattle. I would love to take advantage of the mass transit, but it's not there yet.
We absolutely are. In fact, last week I sat down with the mayors, all the mayors from the east side, to talk about just that. How do we make sure that we are doing our work in conjunction with them to get people so that they can travel into Seattle on transit? Same with mayors from Everett. I'm going to hopefully meeting with the mayor of Tacoma. We're working with Sound Transit also because, as you know, they have a lot of capacity. This, like everything else, we have to have regional solutions, because Seattle does not stand as an island. Too much of our commerce and depends upon people traveling in and out of the city to work, to visit, and the like. So we are committed to doing that and having regional solutions.
Developers should pay for the congestion that they're causing when they're developing these properties.
Reach our goals.
Can you speak to the specific programs that were in Seattle with this award?
You know, this was a very competitive grant. I'll let Mayor Bloomberg maybe address why we were as competitive as we are, but I think it's because Seattle has always been a city that has led on a number of issues, including climate. And we have had very aggressive deadlines, for example, building efficiency. You know, we are fortunate because we have a green grid. We already have electricity and hydropower. I'm talking to WashDOT later today, and I think we'll have something at the beginning of next week to announce on that. Thank you very much, everyone,
Thank
for
you,
coming.
everyone.